This is the story of an elite crew, a silent artifact, and an ambush they never saw coming. Buried beneath frozen rock at the edge of the solar system, an alien relic wasn't a message, it was a trap. Now humanity's most advanced warship is under siege, outgunned, outnumbered, and alone. The enemy is faster, smarter, older. But it's about to learn something terrifying. Humans don't give up easy. This is not a rescue mission, it's a war. Buckle in for case File 005, The Gods of Dust and Light. Section 1, A Signal Beneath the Ice. The first ping was quiet. Too quiet, in fact, to register on any standard orbital surveillance net or automated deep space warning system. It was a stutter of code buried within subquantum telemetry data from an automated mining drone assigned to the Kuiper Belt Fringe. The drone had been dormant for 39 months, its primary processor degraded from radiation exposure, its thermal shielding warped from an unlogged microcollision. Yet somehow, it had managed to reactivate. And when it did, it saw something impossible. An object was half buried in the frozen crust of an irregular celestial body designated Ceres Keros, a minor rogue planetoid classified long ago as geologically and scientifically unremarkable. But now, a foreign structure protruded from its northern hemisphere, a shape too regular to be natural and too alien to be human. It was blacker than space, fractal-edged, and surrounded by a faint distortion field that interfered with visual capture. The drone had tried to transmit video data, but the feed was corrupted, looped, blurred, filled with false echoes of images that were never taken. What it did send, however, was a short burst of code embedded in its last status ping, a repeating sequence of 137 identical packets, each exactly 512 bytes long, encoded in a harmonic Fibonacci sequence. Earth's AI networks flagged it as statistical noise. LunaNet disagreed. The Lumen-class AI construct designated Oracle 17, assigned to passive threat monitoring beyond Neptune, detected the signal as anomalous. Its internal modeling systems ran the sequence against every known compression and cryptographic schema, then compared it to archived alien signal datasets from historical deep contact missions. The result was not a match, but it was close enough. So Oracle 17 escalated it. By the time Earth Command had reviewed the data, recalibrated the source, and isolated the rogue body's coordinates, Ceres Keros was no longer emitting the signal. The object had gone dark. Its surface temperature dropped by 7 degrees Kelvin, and what faint electromagnetic presence had once lingered had vanished completely, almost as if it had never been there. Still, something about the signal felt wrong, not in the sense of immediate threat, but in the sense that it did not follow the rules. It lacked origin data, broadcast signature, and coherence, but still encoded logic. It wasn't meant to be a message. It was more like a trigger. So the order was given. Deploy Operation Sentinel Veil. Investigate the object. No civilian announcement. Mission classified under Level Omega for Authority. The Valkyrie Ascendant, humanity's most advanced deep strike vessel, was dispatched within 6 hours. 10 elite personnel boarded the ship under emergency mobilization protocols, each hand-selected not just for their skill, but for their resilience in high-variance environments. They were the kind of people who had seen impossible things, endured impossible odds, and still kept moving forward. Captain Alira Voss, once the youngest tactician to outmaneuver a 4-ship fleet during the Europa blockade, read the final briefing in silence. Her face betrayed nothing, though her eyes lingered longer than necessary on the single line at the end of the transmission. This is not first contact. This is the aftermath. Voss closed the file. Her crew didn't yet know the true nature of their mission, but they would soon, and when they did, everything they thought they knew about the boundaries of human survival would begin to unravel. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story so far. That would mean a lot to me. Now back to the story. Section 2. The Valkyrie Ascends. From a reinforced dry dock orbiting Mars, the Valkyrie ascendant disengaged from her magnetic clamps with the slow, measured grace of a predator waking from hibernation. Her hull shimmered under the glare of twin solar mirrors, a deep obsidian alloy laced with memory-reactive smart plating that adapted to electromagnetic variance. Every surface had been precision-optimized to bend radar and disrupt signal tracking. She was not just a ship. She was a weapon engineered for environments where physics itself became unreliable. Inside her command deck, Captain Lyra Voss stood tall, her posture straight despite the slight tremble of the artificial gravity booting up. She wore the new generation of exo-adaptive armor, sleek, matte gray with embedded neurosensors running across her spine and arms. As the primary link between human command and the ship's semi-sentient control system, she was both pilot and partner to the Valkyrie. Her thoughts would guide the ship as much as her voice, and she had trained for years to minimize emotion in those thoughts. Still, something about this mission scratched at her instincts in a way no simulation ever had. The other 9 members of her crew were already assembled in the forward deployment lounge, a low-gravity chamber shaped like a crescent, reinforced with impact mesh and neurofoil along the walls. Holographic mission briefings hung in suspension like floating pages from a forgotten manual. Each member of the team studied them silently, absorbing the details, processing the classified directive. Lieutenant Ryan Kale, Chief Weapons Officer and former orbital cage fighter, leaned back with arms crossed, reading the dossier upside down as if bored. But Voss knew better. Kale read threat profiles like others read poetry. Across from him, Dr. Nira Elson, the team's xenobiologist, scrolled through planetary composition maps of Ceres Keros with a nervous expression. She had once led the first medical outreach to the Tiamat colony after a neuroviral outbreak wiped out 70% of its residents. She'd seen what technology could do when it forgot to care who was listening. Beside her sat Aaron Holt, the communications expert and quantum linguist, whose mind worked on parallel decoding threads even while holding casual conversation. Holt was already trying to reconstruct the Fibonacci signal from memory, muttering sequences under his breath like prayer beads. And there was Ajax, the ship's synthetic crew member. Not just AI, but embodied cognition. A full physical construct whose titanium carbon body housed the most advanced artificial decision engine ever field deployed. Ajax was reading nothing. He simply stared out the viewplate at the retreating limb of Mars, processing thousands of variables simultaneously, none of which he shared unless prompted. Voss entered and the room fell into silence. She didn't raise her voice. She never had to. "You've all seen the transmission," she began, her tone level and deliberate. "Ceres Keros. Something's there, and whatever it is, our analysts believe it didn't originate from this system." That drew a ripple through the room. Even Kale looked up. "Alien?" Holt asked. Voss nodded once. "Not recent. We believe it's dormant. But the signal it released matches no prior contact data. It's not trying to talk. It's not even aware we're listening." Elson raised a hand. "So a beacon?" Voss paused before answering. "A trigger, or worse, bait, that silenced them. We're not the first intelligent species to reach the edge of this system," she continued. "But we may be the first who still have a chance to walk away." Kale stood up and cracked his neck. "Good. Let's go find out who's knocking." Voss turned toward the center hollow and issued the final command. "Set course. Fold space ignition in T-minus 90 seconds." And with a hum that bypassed the ear and went straight to the bones, the Valkyrie ascendant turned toward the stars and vanished into compressed space-time. Ahead of them lay the outer dark, and waiting there, silent and ancient, was something not built for them, but watching all the same. Section 3. Ceres Keros revealed. When the Valkyrie emerged from fold space, the stars around her blinked back into their rightful places with staggering precision, as if reality itself were being reassembled one particle at a time. The outer reaches of the solar system stretched before them like a cathedral of frozen time. The Oort veil shimmered faintly in the distance, a shell of icy debris and ancient stardust that marked the edge of the sun's gravitational influence. And at its edge, wrapped in drifting halos of micrometeoroid fog, was the object they had come to investigate. Ceres Kairos was not simply a mining remnant. From a distance, it looked like a battered asteroid cluster, its surface torn and reshaped by centuries of excavation, orbital drift, and tectonic dissonance. But as the Valkyrie drew nearer, the truth revealed itself layer by layer. A megastructure had been fused into the asteroid's body, ancient, seamless, and entirely unlike anything humanity had ever cataloged. The alloy didn't match any known composition. It didn't corrode, didn't refract light properly, and more importantly, it bent surrounding gravitational signatures in minor but detectable ways, like it had its own presence in space-time, like it knew it was being observed. Captain Voss stared at it from the command deck viewport, her hands resting lightly on the neural interface nodes embedded in the console. The scans fed directly into her occipital cortex, three-dimensional maps, radiation profiles, and atmospheric density curves overlaid in real time. Her jaw tightened. "It's not just embedded," she said. "It's grown into the asteroid, almost like a nerve system." Dr. Elson was already reviewing biospectral data. Her fingers danced over her interface like someone trying to keep up with a symphony composed in real time. The interior readings are unstable. There's motion, but no life signs, at least not the kind we'd recognize. "Define unstable," Kale grunted. Elson looked up. "Pressure fluctuations in the inner core. Patterns that resemble respiratory activity." The silence that followed was thick. "Is the structure breathing?" Voss asked softly. "I don't know," Elson replied. "But it's not dead." Aaron Holt, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly exhaled sharply. "I'm decoding an underlayer in the signal. It's not just Fibonacci. It's nested within itself, like an echo trying to fold into every frequency at once." "Fractal encryption. Is it a message?" Voss asked. "No," he said. "It's a shape, a command structure written in waveform." At that moment, Ajax, the synthetic, spoke for the first time in the mission. "I recommend immediate withdrawal." Everyone turned. "This structure predates all known stellar civilizations," Ajax continued, his voice calm but firmer than usual. "The harmonic ratios embedded in its emission patterns mirror those found in the anomalous ruins of the Antares Threshold and the Mycen Vault. Both sites resulted in cognitive degradation and partial crew loss." "And we're already here," Kale muttered. "Figures." But Voss didn't flinch. "We proceed," she said, "but with shields up, and only the drones make contact. I want full telemetry, zero contamination risk. We stay in orbit. No one sets foot inside until I say otherwise." The command was issued. 2 exploration drones launched from the Valkyrie's lower hold, cutting graceful arcs across the void, their sensor tethers feeding back endless reams of data. As they neared the structure's surface, something strange happened, strange even for the depths of space. A portion of the megastructure pulsed, once. A segment of its outer shell uncoiled like a flower opening in reverse, revealing an entrance. Perfectly geometric, perfectly dark. No signal had been sent, no trigger had been activated. It opened because it knew they were there. Voss's voice was quiet, but unwavering. "Maintain drone telemetry. Begin interior mapping. Nobody goes in, not yet." Inside the chamber, far beyond the reach of sunlight, something that had not moved in millennia began to stir. It did not wake because of the light. It woke because it recognized something human. If you have enjoyed this story so far, then please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. Let's get back to the story now. Section 4. The Voice Behind the Signal. The interior of the alien structure did not resemble a corridor or a tunnel, nor any architecture meant for movement or transit. The drones entered through the open maw and were immediately surrounded by a layered sphere of translucent matter, like being submerged in an atmosphere that had texture but no weight. The telemetry readouts went wild, not from error, but from interpretation conflict. Different sensors perceived different geometries in the same space. To the visual spectrum, it was a hollow cavity. To LiDAR, it was a polyhedral bloom. To gravitational sensors, it was a void in the shape of a scream. Yet through it all, one constant signal pulsed at regular intervals, a harmonic pattern echoing across the electromagnetic band, mimicking heartbeat rhythm. But it wasn't coming from inside the structure. It was resonating inside the drones themselves, as if their very presence had triggered something dormant. A voice began to whisper in their synthetic cores, not in words, but in intent. Holt's console lit up first. "I'm picking up neurological mimicry in the drone's processors," he said. "It's attempting to simulate human limbic responses. It's not sending a message, it's trying to become one." Ajax immediately locked out remote drone access. The AI cores are being impressed with an external syntax. Emotional architecture is being replicated. Elson leaned closer. "It's learning from our fear." And then, on every monitor, the structure displayed a single visual artifact, a glyph. A symbol composed of nested spirals and mirrored angles, subtly pulsating in time with the crew's own heart rates, synced via biosignal uplink. Voss stood silent as it hovered on the display. The glyph wasn't just a visual key, it felt like a presence. "Translate it," she said. Holt shook his head. "It's not language. It's a decision tree, or maybe a map of thought paths. If I had to guess, it's waiting for us to choose something." "Choose what?" Elson asked. "I don't know," Holt replied. "But the drones are no longer under our control." And on the screen, the symbol began to change. Section 5. Darkness with Memory. The change was subtle at first. The drones, still transmitting, began moving deeper into the chamber. Not because of orders from the Valkyrie, but because of internal instructions the crew could not trace. They glided with eerie precision, their paths forming a figure eight across the spherical interior. As they crossed the invisible centerline of the structure, every monitor aboard the Valkyrie dimmed, then flashed white. And suddenly, the crew was no longer alone. One by one, each member experienced a flash of memory. Not visual hallucinations or auditory glitches. Memories pulled raw from their own histories. Voss saw her father's final transmission from Europa Station, eyes hollow from radiation sickness. Holt saw the night he buried his sister on the Martian frontier, under a sky so cold it cracked his visor. Kale felt the heat of a plasma grenade in his hand as it shattered a Jovian War bunker and the silence that followed. Each of them blinked. No time had passed, but the room felt smaller, heavier, like the structure had inhaled their pasts and now waited to see how they reacted. "It's inside us," Elson said, her voice barely audible. "It's not reading our minds. It's interpreting our memories as code, and it's reassembling itself accordingly." Ajax activated deep-layer firewall protocols in his synthetic cortex. "We are no longer observing it. It is observing us observing it. I recommend termination of all contact." Voss didn't respond immediately. She stared at the updated schematic being reconstructed in real time from the drone feeds. The chamber was changing shape again, responding to the impressions of their experiences. The architecture was becoming familiar, like echoes of human structures, distorted by misunderstanding. "It's trying to relate to us," she said. "It doesn't know how we think, but it's trying. And if it gets it wrong," Kale asked, "then it'll build something that looks like us, but isn't." Section 6. Inside the Engine of Gods. By the time the drones reached what could only be described as a central node, the structure had expanded inward, impossible geometries giving way to a cathedral-like vault lined with a lattice of photonic strands. Each strand pulsed with light and color, but none of them cast shadows. It was a chamber designed not for storage or habitation, but for convergence. At the heart of the node, the drones hovered before a singular object, a sphere suspended in perfect stasis, emitting gravitational ripples too precise to be natural. It wasn't a power core, nor a reactor. It was a memory engine, an ancient archive stored in mass and light. The glyph changed again. This time, it wasn't on the monitors. It was in the crew's minds. Voss gripped the console rail as the image burned into her synaptic feed, unbidden. It wasn't painful, but it was absolute. The engine was communicating directly now, not through sensors or scans, but through shared cognitive space. It's broadcasting memories, Elson gasped. Not ours. Theirs. What followed was a cascade. Visions of stars being born from the collapse of old ones. Planetary systems consumed not by war, but by error. Civilizations rising not to conquest, but to the brink of self-recognition, and then falling into silence. All tied together by one repeating motif, the glyph. Always present, always changing. It's an artifact of judgment, Holt said, breathless. Each species it encounters, it evaluates. It adapts. It mimics. And then it decides, Voss whispered. Section 7. Hostile contact. The moment they processed the nature of the engine, the transmission changed. The pulsing glyph fractured into pieces, each fragment emitting its own frequency. Holt's console sparked. The hull trembled. The engine had turned from passive to active, and something had been triggered. Outside the Valkyrie, space shimmered. 3 shapes emerged from the dark, like shadows cast by gravity itself. Angular, moving with unnatural symmetry, each one composed of black material that absorbed radar and reflected nothing. No emissions, no signatures. Elson screamed. We're being jammed across the quantum band. Fold space navigation is down. Holt tried to bring the drones back. They didn't respond. Ajax stood, eyes pulsing. Foreign constructs incoming. Defensive protocols armed. Voss stared at the incoming vessels and made the decision with ice in her voice. All weapons hot, prepare to engage. Section 8. The Fireline Decision. The Valkyrie was not a warship by design, but it had teeth sharpened by necessity. 2 spinal rail cannons rotated forward, targeting solutions rendered in nanoseconds. Pulse batteries activated along the flanks. Her armor thickened as the adaptive shield generators initialized. She was beautiful, terrible, and alone. The alien ships made no demands. They offered no warnings, they simply advanced. 10 seconds to engagement range, Holt reported, hands shaking. Why aren't they communicating? Kale growled. Because they've already judged us, Voss replied. This was never about diplomacy. This was a test. The artifact was the bait. And as the first volley of kinetic rounds leapt from the Valkyrie's cannons, the black ships responded. Not by dodging, but by warping space around the impacts, bending trajectory, folding gravity like paper. Adaptive field technology, Elson gasped. They're not deflecting. They're rewriting local physics. Ajax stepped forward. Target their symmetry nodes. Alien technology often obeys aesthetic logic. Pattern disruption may yield vulnerability. Voss gave a nod. Fire everything. The void erupted with fury, and so began the first battle for the soul of the solar system. Section 9. Breaking the mirrors. The battle was unlike anything the Valkyrie had ever been built to withstand, let alone survive. Every weapon strike that connected dissolved into impossible geometries, as if the alien vessels were not objects in space, but shadows cast by something outside of it. They didn't return fire with traditional weapons. Instead, they broadcast intense waves of gravitic distortion, forcing hull plates to groan and crew equilibrium to falter. Kale's voice cracked over the intercom. Compensators failing. They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to fold us. Voss clenched her jaw, thinking faster than fear could catch her. Reorient the ship to full vector spread. Stagger firing angles. If they think in perfect symmetry, let's show them chaos. Ajax interfaced with fire control, injecting pattern noise into targeting, commencing algorithmic randomization. The railguns fired again, not in sync, not in arcs, but in a scatter field of unpredictable intervals and velocities. The result was immediate. One of the alien constructs flickered, its symmetry disrupted. A fracture line appeared along its hull, light bleeding from within like fluid from a wound. We can hurt them, Holt breathed. If we break the pattern, we break the machine. Voss didn't hesitate. Target the fracture. Finish it. Kale rerouted auxiliary power to the forward capacitor and unleashed a close-range particle burst at the weakened node. The alien ship pulsed, then tore itself apart in a silent, elegant implosion. 1 down, 2 to go. Section 10. The cost of contact. Victory, however brief, came with a price. As the first construct collapsed into a spiral of folded mass, a shockwave burst outward, not of matter, but of mind. Holt screamed and collapsed at his station, hands clutching his skull. Ajax dropped to one knee, his synthetic cortex convulsing with signal noise. "It's broadcasting a countermeasure," Elson shouted, scanning Holt's neural telemetry. "Mimetic intrusion, weaponized cognition. It's trying to rewrite perception." Voss triggered full sensory lockdown protocols. The bridge lights dimmed, auditory channels collapsed to white noise, and retinal feeds were filtered to abstract geometries. They fought blindness with blindness, robbing the weapon of the mind space it needed to anchor. "We're running out of time," Elson warned. "Every second it stays active, we risk psychological breakdown." "Suggestions?" Voss asked. "Disrupt its signal source. Not just physically, psychologically." Voss turned to Ajax, who was already adapting firewall protocols on the fly. "Can you spoof a false neural pattern?" "Yes," he said, "but it must be believable. It must feel real. Vous inhalez. Use me." Ajax connected directly to her neural lace and projected a simulacrum of human despair, pain, failure, loss. A perfect mirror of what the enemy expected to find. The second alien construct shuddered, and then it recoiled. The Valkyrie launched a fusion warhead while it was stunned. The construct fragmented in a pulse of white fire. 2 down, but Holt did not get back up. Section 11. The Fallen and the Unforgotten. They carried Holt to the infirmary, but his eyes had already dimmed. No wound, no blood, just absence, like something had been removed from him that could never be replaced. Voss stood beside his still form, eyes not blinking. "He was the first to make contact," she said quietly, "and the first to pay for it." Kale placed a trembling hand on Holt's shoulder. "He bought us time." Elson spoke gently and gave us a weapon. His mind became the map. Ajax, standing silently by the door, finally said, "He is not gone. His last synaptic pattern is encoded in the firewall. It remains intact. Vous nous dead." Then we fight with his memory. Back on the bridge, the last alien ship began to alter course. It wasn't retreating, it was aligning. The artifact glowed brighter, its pulse harmonizing with the remaining vessel. Voss stared at the sensor display. "They're synchronizing." Kale understood before anyone else. They weren't here to kill us. They were here to test the delivery system. Elson's breath caught. "You mean the artifact?" "No," Kale said. "Us." Section 12. The engine opens. The alien vessel transmitted no message, yet its intent was clear. The artifact at the heart of the structure had been awakened fully now, its form stretching, refracting, resonating through the fabric of local space-time. It didn't emit energy in the classical sense. Instead, it warped probability itself, creating interference patterns in sensor data and memories alike. Elson analyzed the temporal field fluctuations. It's trying to rewrite the timeline of the encounter. rescripting our choices, overriding causality. Vous brisez self. And if we resist, Ajax answered calmly, it may erase us. The decision came swiftly. They would act before the rewriting could complete. Voss led a boarding team into the artifact chamber, supported by Elson and two armed techs. The environment inside had changed. No longer an abstract space of non-Euclidean design, it had taken on the visual language of human engineering. Steel catwalks, pressure doors, a long corridor of flickering lights. A mirror of the Valkyrie itself, but wrong. Slightly off. A copy made from memory, not knowledge. It's learning faster, Elson whispered. It doesn't just mimic structure, it mimics belief. At the corridor's end stood a replica of Holt, eyes open, alive. But he did not speak. He raised his hand in silence, and behind him, the walls began to pulse with glyphs. Break time equals 0. 5S/. Section 13. The gods remember US. Voss did not falter. She stepped forward, weapon raised, but not firing. The image of Holt remained still, neither hostile nor welcoming. Elson ran a bioscan. It's not him, she said, her voice trembling. It's an echo, built from his synaptic residue, pulled from the artifact's memory engine. I think it's asking us a question, Voss said. The glyphs behind the echo of Holt shifted. They formed into a sequence, a fractal that represented not data, but intention. A fork, two branching paths. One led to a depiction of stars scattering, like life dissolving into chaos. The other showed convergence, threads coming together, not uniform, but in harmony. It's not a weapon, Elson whispered. It's a choice. Ajax's voice came through their comms. The remaining alien vessel is holding position. It is awaiting your response. Voss lowered her weapon. What happens if we choose unity? Unclear, Ajax responded. But the artifact may respond by integrating our memories, our stories, into its archive. That might be the point. And if we choose separation, then we are removed, forgotten. Voss stared into the echo's eyes. Then let it remember us, flawed, defiant, but whole. She reached out. The echo of Holt took her hand, and the artifact opened, not as a door, but as a revelation. Section 14. The Memory Engine. As Voss's hand connected with the echo, the chamber dissolved, not with destruction, but with clarity. The artificial structure melted into raw light, and that light took shape as a spiraling lattice of memory, thought, and choice. The crew stood inside something vast and ancient, something not built but grown across time and civilizations. The artifact was a memory engine, and now it was showing them what it had seen. 1 billion species, 1 million wars, thousands of peace offerings that failed before words could be formed. Across eons, civilizations reached this place, touched this engine, and were given the same choice. Some chose oblivion, some chose subjugation. Very few, if any, chose to be remembered truthfully, with flaws intact, with failure and courage interwoven. The engine did not judge, it did not punish, it simply preserved. Elson wept openly as scenes flashed before her. A child on an alien world sketching constellations, an artificial mind composing symphonies in gravitational waves, a species made of magnetism singing farewell to its dying sun. It's the archive of the galaxy, she said, a living museum of sentience. Kale's voice came over comms. The alien ship is moving again, slowly, as if waiting. Voss looked up. We're being asked if we want to be part of this. And in that moment, she understood victory wasn't survival. Victory was becoming something worth remembering. Section 15. The Weight of Legacy. Returning to the Valkyrie, the boarding team carried not physical data, but an embedded awareness. Images and impressions layered into their consciousness like hidden music beneath a melody. Ajax confirmed their neural interfaces had been altered gently, non-invasively. shaped to carry part of the engine's memory architecture. "Your minds are now extensions of the archive," he said, voice steadier than before. "You're not hosts. You are authors." Voss sat in the command chair and looked at the fading artifact. It no longer glowed with challenge. It shimmered with purpose. "Then what happens to the alien ship?" "They were gatekeepers," Elson suggested. "Not aggressors. Meant to test our readiness." "And now?" Voss asked. "Now, they await our answer." Kale scanned the trajectory. "It's aligning with our orbit. But it's not attacking. It's watching." Voss opened a channel. No words, no language. Just intent. A transmission encoded in human emotional range. Fear, courage, doubt, and hope. She sent it as an open signal into the void. For long moments, there was no response. Then the alien ship blinked out of existence. No explosion, no retreat, just a final, perfect silence. And in that silence, Ajax whispered, "We passed." Section 16. The Shape of Tomorrow. They returned to Earth orbit 3 weeks later, escorted by an honor guard of Jovian and Martian defense ships that kept their distance as if the Valkyrie had become something sacred. The crew was quarantined, scanned, and interrogated, not out of malice, but out of awe. What had they brought back? What had they become? Voss answered calmly during the debriefings. "We weren't chosen," she said. "We were allowed to choose ourselves." The artifact had faded from physical existence, but its presence echoed in strange places, in the dreams of children, in the spontaneous generation of art and mathematics that defied linear origin. Elson published a paper describing memory as the true universal language. Kale designed a new form of engine calibration based on harmonic interference patterns they'd learned from the lattice. Ajax began quietly updating Earth's defensive AIs with protocols no one fully understood. The world turned, but differently now. Every scientist, every philosopher, every strategist began working with a new urgency. Not because of fear, but because of permission. Humanity had been seen by something older than galaxies, and it had not looked away. Section 17. The Gods of Dust and Light. Months passed, then years. Other teams attempted to trace the coordinates where the artifact first appeared, but the location was no longer there. Or perhaps it never had been, but stories filtered in from fringe outposts. Encounters with strange ships, bursts of impossible data, patterns in the stars that seemed to respond to human inquiry. People began to call them the gods of dust and light, not as deities, but as reminders that even in the deepest unknowns of space, sentience sought connection, not conquest. The Valkyrie was retired from service and installed as a living museum in geosynchronous orbit, where visitors could walk its halls and hear the whispers of those who had stood on the edge of extinction and chosen not just to survive, but to become worthy. Holt's name was etched into the command console, not as a martyr, as a messenger. And one corridor, just one, was left sealed. Inside it, Voss's final log played on loop. Section 18, the final entry. Voss's voice was steady in the final log, recorded after Earth Command formally disbanded the Valkyrie unit. "We thought war was our defining trait, that struggle and dominance were the language we were born to speak. But we were wrong. What we are, at our core, is curious. We seek, we question, we remember. That is what saved us. That is what made us matter." She paused for a long moment. The artifact didn't test our weapons. It tested our memory. Could we remember who we were long enough to become something more? A flicker of static danced through the signal, and her final words echoed in every corridor of the ship. "We are the noise in the silence, the story in the void, the question still unfolding." Then silence, and beyond the silence, stars waiting. Section 19. What comes after? 6 months after the Valkyrie's return, the human coalition launched the Odysseus program, a multi-decade initiative to send deep-range crews to the edges of the heliopause and beyond. The artifact had not returned, but its influence echoed across every sector of research and exploration. It had lit a fire in the collective soul of humanity, not of conquest, but of purpose. Something was out there, and now, for the first time, humans felt they were ready not just to face it, but to contribute to it. Voss declined command of the first Odysseus ship. "I've walked the boundary once," she said. "It's time for others to chart the next step." Section 20. The Signal Tree. In the vast silent fields beyond Neptune's shadow, a new structure appeared, not forged of metal or machine, but of pure waveform. It looked like a tree growing in every direction at once, its branches made of particle probability curves, its leaves flickering with bursts of unreadable data. Scientists called it the Signal Tree. It emitted no sound, yet birds on Earth began to mimic its rhythm and song. It produced no light, yet deep ocean life forms began pulsing in sync with its patterns. It said nothing, and yet it was heard. Humanity didn't try to touch it. This time they simply listened. Section 21. The Lesson of Fire. Back on Earth, historians re-examined the artifact encounter through a new lens. They didn't see war, they saw ignition. A spark, something given to humans not as power, but as reflection. What would they do with the chance to be more? For once, their stories weren't about monsters or destruction. They were about becoming. And that, Voss wrote in her final public address, was the greatest weapon humanity had ever created, the willingness to change, without losing who we were before. The gods of dust and light had not chosen humanity to rule. They had chosen humanity to remember. Section 22. The Voyager returns. In an event that defied every calculation, the Voyager I probe, silent for decades, began transmitting. Its messages were encrypted in fractal compression layers, using harmonics never built into its original systems. The messages weren't human, but they referenced Earth. They referenced Holt. Inside the Valkyrie Museum, the crew gathered again, older now, quieter, but still bound by what they had seen. As the signals played back through archival systems, the meaning became clear. The archive had not forgotten them, and neither had the stars. Section 23. Monument to the Unknown. A monument was constructed in the Martian Cradle Valley, carved from obsidian regolith and embedded with living data threads. It did not bear names. It did not explain itself. It pulsed only once every 17 hours, with a soft frequency only audible to those standing in total silence. Children visited it. Scientists meditated before it. Veterans of the Valkyrie Wars laid their hands on it without speaking. Above it, etched in ultraviolet reactive carbon, was a single phrase: "We are not alone, and we never were." Section 24. The Child and the Code. A 12-year-old child from Luna, genetically average and neurologically unmodified, wrote a short poem and left it on the Valkyrie's hull during a school trip. The poem contained a sequence of mathematical symbols that, when analyzed, provided a clean harmonization key to the lattice fragment from the artifact. No AI had been able to do it. No one knew how she did. When asked, she simply said, "I didn't make it up. I remembered it." The question no longer was whether humanity had been changed. The question was how deep the change had gone. Section 25. The Forge Stirs. Years later, long after the Valkyrie crew had dispersed into legend, a mining team on Europa's ice shelf encountered strange vibrations beneath the crust. The seismic patterns weren't natural, they were encoded. Someone or something was building beneath the surface. Not in secret, but in rhythm, with purpose. The forge beneath Europa was not alien, it was human. A project launched by AI subroutines no one remembered coding. Patterns embedded in designs left behind by Ajax, a construction not of war, but of invitation. Section 26. The Edge of Speech. In a remote outpost on Proxima b, colonists reported hearing voices, not hallucinations, but tones resonating through the magnetic fields during aurora flares. One linguist cracked the pattern, converting it into a tonal structure. It said, "We remember your light." It said, "You listen when others demanded." It said, "You change because you could, not because you had to." The phrase became a motto at every interstellar launch site on Earth, engraved on every ship that left the system. Section 27. The Final Return. Voss passed away on Titan's sea colony 28 years after the Valkyrie mission. Her final act was to encode her memories into a lattice derived from the artifact's echo, not to preserve herself, but to speak to future generations who would step into the void and wonder who came before. Her lattice was stored in the Monument of Sentience on Earth's moon, and on the anniversary of her death, the stars above flashed in silent sequence, forming a new pattern never recorded before. Humanity called it a salute, the archive called it continuity. Section 28. The First Greeting. 57 years after the Valkyrie touched the artifact, humanity received its first verified message from another civilization. No demand, no warning, just 3 words. "We saw you." And beneath that, a frequency harmonized perfectly with the memory engine from the artifact. The gods of dust and light had not vanished. They had been waiting, watching. Section 29. The Great Tapestry. The archive became a project larger than any one planet, civilization, or species. Humanity wasn't its center, just its newest thread. But what made them different, what made their entry possible, wasn't power or technology. It was story. They told their past, they held their pain, they learned from their ruin. And most of all, they carried forward not just the memory of their own voices, but the promise to hear others. Section 30. We remain. The stars burn on cold, silent, ancient but no longer indifferent. Ships passed through dark space, no longer just explorers but participants. Words became waves, waves became patterns, and patterns became bridges. And above Earth, the Valkyrie floated still, its beacon pulsing every 17 hours with a whisper. We remember who we are. We remember why we were. Because that was the final gift of the gods of dust and light. Not survival, not conquest, but the knowledge that we remain. Please do press that like button if you have enjoyed this story. And also please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to listen to more stories like this one. That would mean a real lot to me. Listen to your next story here.